We're at 2:01, so I am going to go ahead and kick us off officially. So again, welcome. Thanks for joining us. This is Accessible Web Thursday office hours. Today, we are kicking off a very special four-part series where we are going to be talking with different users of assistive technology and really keeping the focus on the user side and getting their perspective on digital accessibility, how it is for them when things go really well and how it is when things don't go so well. And they're just going to be sharing some of their personal stories and lived experience with us. So, with that said, I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Heather Berg, and I'm a digital equity specialist here at Accessible Web. And we do have a special guest today. I'm going to go ahead and let him introduce himself, and then I'm going to just give us a quick overview of the presentation. We'll run through a few slides, and then we'll get right into the conversation. So, Bob, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself now.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you to everybody at Accessible Web for inviting me. I really appreciate it. My name is Bob Tonander, and I'm a vocational rehabilitation counselor with the Vermont Division for the Blind and Visually Impaired. I've been working in this field for about 5 years now, and have before that a long history working in the mental health field. And I'm also a person who's blind, and I use assistive technology every day, all day. So it's one of the things I really love to talk about.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being willing to join us and share your story today. So we'll just move through the overview here. We're going to just talk a little bit about sort of the intention behind the webinar. Then we're going to do a very brief primer on the types of assistive technology that we're going to be talking about during our conversation today, and a few special considerations for those. And then we'll talk about what some of the most common types of that particular technology are that we'll be seeing or you might hear about out in the wild. So um, really the intention with this webinar series is to focus on the fact that the disabled lived experience is very often the missing link in digital accessibility work, right? We like to get really into the weeds on the technical side of things, and that is super, super important. And sometimes we forget kind of why we're all here, which is to create great user experiences for everyone, and in particular, those of us with disabilities who rely on assistive technology and in turn accessible content. So we're hoping to bridge that gap a little bit for you all through some candid conversations and just sharing of lived experience. And I just want to like honor and acknowledge that sharing these kind of personal stories can be a little bit vulnerable. And so I just want to keep this like an open, safe space where we can all talk about what's real for us. And that goes for the audience as well. If you have questions that you're not quite sure maybe how to word them, or if it's okay to ask, this is the place to ask. Okay, this is a place where we're just here to learn and grow and support one another. So yeah, any of those questions you've been thinking about, today's the day, and this is a great place. All right, so with that said, the type of technology we are going to be talking about today are screen readers. In particular, screen readers are used by individuals who are, most commonly, by individuals who are blind or visually impaired. And alongside that, we need to also talk about refreshable braille displays. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But screen readers basically are software that conveys visual content or information on a screen to a user via speech output or a refreshable braille display. A refreshable braille display, very briefly, is a piece of hardware that works alongside a screen reader, and it usually connects via like Bluetooth or USB to your device. And then you're able to consume visual information in dynamic real-time braille that refreshes as you move through content. And it's important to know that as we talk about screen readers, because there are plenty of blind people who prefer braille as their primary means of taking in information. And in fact, there are people who are deafblind for whom that tactile sense is really their only ability to perceive and take in information. So we just want to be really sure that we're considering that as we talk about the screen reader experience. Okay. So screen readers are very powerful and robust pieces of software. They are also highly customizable. And most importantly, screen readers alone cannot make content accessible. They, in fact, rely on accessible content to do their job. Couple of quick caveats related to screen readers. No two screen reader user experiences are ever going to be the same. And so we really need to be sure that we're not making assumptions about their screen reader user experience. If we talk to one person, we know how everybody's experience is going to be. And that's down to several factors, but three variables are that user customization that I spoke about earlier. Folks are going to have their tech dialed in just the way they need it for their use case. Um, the screen reader and browser combination that people are using can influence the experience that the users have, depending on the type of content. And then also, and I think Bob, you'll probably speak to this a little bit, is the user's level of proficiency with their assistive technology, and probably even more so, like how long have they been using that technology, right? So I grew up using it. My experience is going to be very different than someone who's only recently lost their vision and kind of moving into this way of um, moving through the world. And with all that, some names of screen readers you might hear in the wild: JAWS, just like the shark, it stands for Job Access with Speech. NVDA, Non-Visual Desktop Access. VoiceOver on all of our beloved Apple devices. TalkBack is the Google and Android screen reader. And there's Narrator on the Windows operating system. All right, so that's kind of our quick little primer for some context to kick off our conversation. Um, and we'll go right into our first question. And so this will be for you, Bob. And when you think about your daily routines, whether it's schoolwork, personal, can you share a few experiences where technology helped you to do something really smoothly and easily or complete a task?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I could talk about a lot of different technology. I use it all day in various contexts, but one of the technologies that I've been using more and more lately is AI. Um, and so for example, with JAWS, JAWS has a tool now called Picture Smart. And as somebody who manages a caseload of participants and handles a lot of documents, that tool has given me access to content I previously couldn't access, even with OCRing it, or I might have to print it and scan it or something. It's a much quicker process, and really so I'm able to access new types of content independently. But the big thing with AI that is so helpful, that I'm still learning how to do, is the ability to ask it questions. It can make the process of accessing a document so much more efficient for people like me who are blind and using screen readers. I don't have to read all of the information on the entire page, top to bottom, left to right. I can scan, a document, and I can say, tell me what the invoice number is, and it will give me that piece of information. Um, and I use it in my personal life too. There's an app called Be My Eyes that is free that anyone can download, and it has a Be My AI component in it. So I use that every day, all day, to access visual information. I recently had a new ceiling fan installed in my house, and I didn't know how to use the remote, so I could take a picture of the remote with that app, and I can ask it, describe the buttons on this remote with oriented to a clock face, and tell me what each button does. And so it describes it in that way to me, and it allows me to understand a lot of different things. I use it for recognizing colors, reading recipes, reading my mail. Yeah, AI has been a big new thing that I'm learning how to use.
Yeah, it absolutely has, and it's certainly on everybody's minds these days. And it has been tremendously helpful for those of us who need additional information about our environment and the world around us. I certainly appreciate what you're saying about the ability to get just the information you want.
Mhm.
So we've had OCR, right, optical character recognition, for a long time, but that was very linear, very like left to right, top to bottom. You kind of had to have everything or nothing. And now that ability to discern and get just what you're looking for has been a real improvement, and helps, I'll say, me to be more efficient and timely in terms
Mhm.
of getting things done. And,
Yep.
we can't have the AI conversation without the usual caveats too, right? That it's
Yeah.
certainly not the latest and greatest accessibility be all solution, and definitely has a long ways to go before we're there. But there are certainly some ways that it's been implemented that is making life better, for a lot of folks. So, kind of kicking it off with that, let's switch it up a little bit now and say, could you talk about, Bob, any experiences where you've run into barriers with either digital content or tools like websites or apps, and where that's actually made things harder or even impossible for you to complete tasks?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, I run into problems most frequently online when I'm trying to purchase a service or a product, and I have to complete a form. And I think, the thing for somebody like me who's using a screen reader, um, I'm not, I'm learning about and understanding what's on the page, element by element, whereas a visual person will get the whole picture and then use that context to understand the individual elements. I'm kind of piecing together a picture of the whole from the individual components that I might access. And so when I'm in a form, if the form has fields that aren't labeled, so the screen reader can't tell me at all or even accurately what information is really needed in that field, that can be really challenging. If there's required information on the form that won't allow me to submit it without it being provided,
Mm,
but it's hard to tell. If you have a form that has 25 questions, and it can be really difficult to understand which is the field I'm missing. So those are and that can prevent me from being able to to purchase the travel reservation or whatever I'm trying to do
mm,
at the time. But it's really those forms and the fields, not work like you said very well. I mean, the screen readers can access the content, but they
mm.
are only as useful as the end product.
Right.
They kind of have to work together. So yeah,
Yeah,
those are my main
absolutely.
experiences. Yep.
And I think, one thing that I really, pretty much heard you saying was like, this could be a reason why we might not be able to purchase something from your site or your company or your business,
Yeah,
right? We are going
absolutely.
to move on to wherever we can make that flight reservation or wherever we can make that purchase. And, these are the things that I think don't believe anyone ever sets out to make it difficult for customers to give them money, right?
Yeah,
It's not how you
right.
run a business. But in fact, that's the reality for some of us. And so I just think that's where these kind of, conversations about where the rubber meets the road are really, um, really informative. So now thinking about, Bob, what does work really well. So if you're on a website or a mobile app that's working really well for you, are there any like features or design choices that really stand out to you in terms of creating that experience where things are working well and you're not encountering barriers?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think simplicity, consistency. So if you're asking for information to be inputted, having some kind of consistent way that that information is collected, whether that's a combo box or that's an edit field, it, you know, having oftentimes if I'm accessing a website, having landmarks, so I can use
Mm,
specific
mhm,
keystrokes to get to different elements if they're set up in a digital content or a web page. And so having those markers in place so I can quickly move through like I said, trying to understand the whole from the elements. So if I can move through and hear headings, for example, that tell me the different sections, I think it's really helpful too if there's a logical sequence
Mm-hmm.
to elements. So, I'm oftentimes, if it's inputting data into to edit fields, if there are, say, columns on a page, if the tab sequence goes column to column instead of down through the column sequentially, that can get really confusing. So, when people take the time to really make the page something that works the way a screen reader user moves through their content, as opposed to the way somebody may visually do it, I think that really helps.
Yeah, 100%. That focus order is so critical. And I think it is not widely understood that, in fact, you and I, Bob, are navigating our content very differently than the sighted person in terms of like you described, the way we're sort of moving from element to element, trying to glean what's on that page. We're not skimming with our eyes. We're not like zoom scrolling as fast as you can on with
Mhm.
your mouse from top to bottom. I kind of liken it to like a little bit of a treasure hunt, right? We're like
Yeah.
trying to put the pieces together to make the puzzle look like something that we recognize. So that consistency, predictability, knowing how a screen reader moves through focus items, um, really will serve you well in terms of um, having your customers in particular using screen readers feel like, ooh, they get me. They want me here. Like they showed up and they put down, something that is letting me know that they know, I'm here and I'm using this content and I'm really enjoying it. So, um, awesome. So I guess next question, I just want to know, in your experience, how do things like inaccessibility affect like your time, your efficiency, your ability to get things done, your ability to stay connected, those sorts of things. Can you speak to that or even your independence?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think assistive technology is a huge leveler of the playing field, and it makes so many things possible. And so when it works right, honestly, I don't think about it a whole lot. But if I can't complete a task that I need to, whether it's for work or personal, I mean, it can affect me on a lot of different levels. Time wise, I have the same demands on my time as anybody else.
Mm,
And I may only have, a few minutes to do something. And if I can't get it done, that can be really discouraging. It can definitely cause me, to move quickly away from something that's not working. Just if there's another option for
mhm,
completing the same purchase, I might move away
mhm,
pretty quickly, because I know, something that about me is I've used, like you, Heather, I've used assistive technology for a long time and I use it all day, every day. So I'm a pretty accomplished user because of that. And so I
mhm,
know when assistive technology should be working. Not everybody does. There's people who've recently lost their vision, and all of this is very new to them. Maybe young people who are kind of ambivalent about using assistive technology and embracing their identity as a person with a disability.
mhm,
The tolerance level for encountering issues, and just the ability to really know when it should be working, or it could be working, or this has worked
yeah,
before.
yeah,
Um, and I think, unfortunately, a lot of times what happens, it's happened for me, I've seen it happen for the folks that I know and that I work with, is sometimes folks just give up. And
yeah,
then, that option for connecting, whatever it might have been, goes away. As isolation is a huge issue with the blindness and low
mhm,
vision community.
mhm.
So it can have an enormous impact.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that again, another sort of underappreciated area of living in a world that's not designed around our needs is just the mental labor. I mean, you can call it
Mhm.
cognitive load, mental labor, like um I think that goes sort of unseen and unappreciated because, um, we are just trying to figure out a workaround and do the best we can,
Yep.
and get the thing done, right?
Yep.
And that everybody certainly is going to have a different tolerance for that. And a lot of us sort of unwittingly become like power users, right, with our assistive
Yeah.
tech because like we just have to. And I just feel like everybody shouldn't have to get to that level just to navigate the world, right? The digital world in
Exactly.
particular. If that's a
Yep.
choice for you, then that's great. But it just really, on its face shouldn't be a struggle like that. I know we're really ticking through the time here. I just had a couple of other questions I wanted to ask you. And the first one was, have you ever encountered a situation where something has been sort of advertised to you as accessible or claimed to be accessible, and yet the end user experience as a person with a disability using assistive technology has still been pretty poor? Can you think of a
Oh,
time when that's happened or give us an
yeah.
example?
Absolutely, all that happens all the time. Recent examples would be around, an online platform for required training I had for work at a former employer. You know, they were quite pretty confident that it was accessible, but when there were two screen reader users in the organization. We both had the same experience. So when we tried to use it and could report back, our feedback about what we were actually experiencing as opposed to what their expectations were, they were able to, we were able to actually provide feedback that helped them resolve the issue.
Mm.
And they had done work and they wanted the site to be accessible. And I just don't know if they had you know, the elements tested by somebody with a screen reader.
Sure.
Another platform we use for getting documents signed, where we could send documents electronically.
Mm.
Again, there was a pretty a lot of work had been done to make it accessible, but only once we tried using it as a screen reader user were we able to see, hey, but here's something that doesn't work. When you pop into this field, nothing the screen reader isn't able to tell me what I'm supposed to put in it because it needs to be labeled, for example.
Yeah, and I can imagine that that is frustrating and disappointing on a lot of different levels because
Yeah.
you have your employer who probably purchased this software having either been told or seen in a VPAT or something like that that it was accessible.
Yeah.
And so now they've purchased something that they thought was accessible and it isn't. The user's not having a great experience. The company who was selling it, giving everyone the benefit of the doubt, thought they were selling an accessible product. And the missing link was the lived experience. Nobody tested it with a native user of assistive technology. Um, another thing that kind of comes to mind for me in this particular area is overlay technologies as well, right? So they're often billed as fixing all of your accessibility issues on your website or whatever. And again, an unsuspecting business owners thinking they're doing the right thing. They're
Right.
purchasing this technology, they're installing it on their site, and their users are having just categorically terrible experiences. And again, it's not productive or useful pretty much at every layer. Um, do you have any experience with that type of technology?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
all the time.
it's a
So,
it's
but I mean, the positive is the companies want, they
that's
want to make things
right.
accessible,
Right,
and
that's what I'm saying. Like they
yeah,
set out with good intentions.
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
when screen reader users test, and are actually going through it to try to use it, because it's the difference between, as you guys know much better than I do, it's the difference between accessibility and usability, or an equitable product.
100%. And so I think this is going to lead us right into our last question. And just before I say that, if you are someone in a position where you're purchasing this software or figuring out, like a website to use or an app for a particular situation, even if you are getting that documentation like the ACR or the VPAT, you want to be looking for information included in there that says we tested this with users of assistive technology, right?
Yeah.
Um, because that's pretty much going to be your insurance policy to make sure that whatever you're being sold is in fact very likely to be a good experience for your users. And you can, when it's been conducted, you can find that information in those resources. And so, yeah, that led us right up to the very last thing I wanted to ask you, Bob, which is if you could sit down with a developer or a designer of a product or a website or software, like what, and they genuinely wanted to make their product usable and for folks with disabilities to have a great experience, what piece of advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think a lot of the things we've talked about in that, and I think it all comes down to including the input, the feedback of actual users of screen readers when you're designing. Um,
Absolutely.
because that's going to give you the ability um from the starting point, you know be able to design things in a way that's going to be useful to both people who don't need a screen reader and people who do, because it's that understanding how we learn about what's on the screen, having those logical sequences of tabs, having some, consistency about how you're inputting data. But at the end of the day, the main advice I would say is find that way of getting input from people who are using screen readers and want to access your services or your products,
Yep.
and they will tell you.
100% engage your stakeholders with disabilities right from the jump,
Yeah,
early and often.
yeah,
And that's going to help overall improve your end user product for everybody, really.
yeah.
And it's the
And
most cost effective and efficient way to get things done.
yeah, and I think too, having a process where even if something gets, through that initial design process, um, when you're asking people to give feedback, really having the folks who are taking that feedback in, trained to help encourage people to keep
Mm,
giving the feedback.
mhm,
Because I've definitely had experiences where maybe I didn't get a response at all, or the response I got from say like a feedback link or customer service person, felt a little, whether the intent was this or not, if sometimes it can feel a little defensive when people come back and say, but this is accessible. I
mhm,
had an
mhm,
experience just yesterday with an email I got, for a product that's not working, that I had contacted people and they, said, thank you for doing this. It's an important part of our process to get your feedback. We really want your feedback. And at no point did they ever say, but, we know this is already accessible. They really were, encouraging, and grateful for me taking the time to give my feedback. So I think that would be
sure.
another piece of advice I would offer.
Well, that's perfect because, in fact, I skipped a question just because I knew we were getting crunched on time, but that was going to be the question was, have you had challenges getting customer support or accommodations related to digital products? And if so, what could folks do to make that a little bit better? So, I think you pretty much just answered that for us, right? Like acknowledge that the issue exists for the user, and really listen and try to understand what's going on from their perspective. Yeah, 100%. Well, thank you so much. This has been really insightful. I'm so grateful to have our audience. They hear from me quite a bit. So I'm really grateful to have them hear from someone else's perspective. And I'm realizing now that I like totally forgot all the housekeeping stuff at the beginning of this session because I was just really excited. But we are now going to just move into Gianna's going to wrap up for us with other ways accessible web can help with your accessibility journey. And then we are going to have a Q&A. I know we're a little tight on time, but please use the Q&A feature in Zoom to drop your comments and questions. And we will be here for a little while longer to engage in those conversations and get your questions answered. And your questions can be related to our topic today or anything generally accessibility related.
Thank you, Heather. No, this was wonderful. This was a fantastic conversation, and we already have quite a few questions in chat. So, that said, I know that we are at time. This will be recorded, and we do make the questions and answers and our webinar session for today available after the fact. So, if you have to hop, it's okay. But if you can hang out for a few more minutes, we can try to get through a couple of these questions here. And because we've got quite a bit of great engagement. So,
So,
in general, Accessible Web is here to help kind of with helping make your products and services more accessible. We have a comprehensive range of both tools and services that we are able to lend to you. I dropped a coupon code in the chat with a link to register for Ramp, which is our platform, and is a great way to kind of begin thinking about this on the technical side of things, as well as just general conformance requirements. So certainly check that out. But I'm going to jump right into questions so we can get a couple of these answered while everybody's here.
awesome.
First off, concerning purchases made online, how do you know that the registered numerical information from your, how do you know the required numerical information from your credit cards? So, like, are your credit cards in Braille? I think is what this question's asking.
Hmm.
You want to take
Well,
that one, Bob, or I'm
yeah, yeah. I mean, I use an app. I know that the Be My AI app advertises that they do not store or retain data. So I might use that app. I usually memorize the number to be quite honest with you, but
yeah, yeah,
um,
same.
yeah, but I can use an app that I feel is secure to be able to know that.
Awesome.
Yeah, and you could store it in a secure location, on your device as well, where you could access it, or you could go old school and type it out in Braille and keep it, in a file that
That's
way
true.
too. That's going to be different answer. But no, we don't get special, I'm air quoting, Braille credit cards. Not that we'd object to that.
That would
That
be
would
a
be
nice
cool.
thing.
It'd be a good security feature too, right? Nobody be
Sure.
sneaking our number.
Put the CVV code in Braille there.
Right.
Okay, what is your experience with pop-up boxes on web and mobile? Are they accessible? I can tell this is going to be kind of a load question because I know it varies.
It absolutely does. It kind of all over the place.
Depends on how you build it.
Right. The bigger question is, should they be accessible? And yes, we
Yes.
definitely need to be able to access those. I'll just say quickly, like they can create a variety of issues, right? You might not even, depending on, how it's built, your technology might not even know it's there. Or it's not getting focused. So you literally have no ability to perceive that it's there. It could get focused and you could get trapped. You could get keyboard trapped
Mhm.
in it. So yeah, I mean it runs the gamut. It could get focus and the content won't be able to be read. And then you're doing something like Bob was describing with Picture Smart or some
Yeah.
other way of trying to extract text from that. And it could be a deal breaker. It might
Mhm.
prevent you from being able to move through a process.
Yeah, and this kind of relates to another question we have here, which is are there times when visual design interfaces in your when visual design interferes with your screen reader's ability to interpret content accurately? And I feel like that question connects right in there with yes, that there can be.
And
Absolutely.
it can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge to even figure out what's going on, right? Because it, it, I don't know how people really like visually interact, right, with content. So, um, it's hard to say, but what I do know, and the longer I do this work, the more confident I am. There are plenty of ways to make your content visually appealing and fully
Mm.
accessible and have a great user experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with all these kind of questions about the technical side of how do you build this, the answer is yes, it can be. It can create barriers for people with assistive technology, but the goal is to build it in a way that it does not, and that's kind of what we're here to help you figure out in general. And in these webinar series, we're getting into the experience of disabled users, but we also do a fair number of webinar series both on the technical WCAG success
Mhm.
criteria and also other technical bits to help answer these questions more in depth because there's a lot of nuance that goes into how to do all these things correctly, which is why it's a whole area of services. Um, what are your preferences when it comes to image descriptions? What type and level of detail do you find helpful? I know I'll just say right off the bat, we have some resources on our website too aimed at this. So I would certainly check out our knowledge base. We've got quite a few on, image descriptions, complex images, but I'll let you guys share your personal experience here too.
Sure. You want to take this one, Bob?
Sure. I mean, I think it really depends on what the purpose of the image is. If it's just, a photograph that's there for, a visual appeal, then I don't need a lot of description. But if it's graphical information, a chart or something like that, then the more information I have, the better.
Yeah.
That is something that Picture Smart can do, so that those tools can help provide a description and allow us to ask questions about it, which is really helpful. But just depending on if it's providing important information, then more
Yeah.
detail is better.
Perfect. Yeah, you want to make sure that a user who does not have visual sight is able to get the same experience and essential information out of any images or descriptions or charts or anything that are present. So that's what you want to think about with those image descriptions. You don't need to give just a ton of added random details. It's
Right.
what's important.
Right, because you're probably going to, honestly, you're going to get a different answer from like every person you ask, right? So
Yeah.
the key is to convey an equitable experience and information, whether you're using your eyeballs or not.
Yeah. And then we've got one last little question here, which is, how do you know what you type is free of typos?
Ah,
Rarely is.
yeah, right.
Same.
Like you've obviously seen me type.
You
Yeah.
do better than I do most of the time, Heather.
So yeah, that's a great question, and 100% fair. And in fact, one of the things I mentioned earlier is how customizable the screen reader technology is, and we are able to pretty granularly adjust so we can hear every character we type. We could hear only the words. We could hear the characters and the words. And also if you're using a refreshable braille display, you're editing as you go along. So I imagine I use spell check, I use grammar check, those tools when they're accessible to us.
Yeah.
We use them pretty much the same way anybody else would use
I was
them.
gonna say it sounds very similarly to how I do it.
Yeah.
I have apparently great vision, but I also have trouble tracking with my eyes. So I am very, very likely to overlook like similar words or repeated words and things
Yeah.
like that. So I need a spell checker as much as anybody else because
Right.
I am very typo prone as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. This was wonderful. I learned a lot today. Thank you so much, guys. We are going to be here again next week with a continuation of our Heather's Assistive Technology series. We also have Manual Audit Mondays if you want to get into the more granular WCAG success criteria and how to do manual tests for those. We are doing a series every Monday where you can join us and actually get into the weeds on how to run some manual checks for various success criterias. And then if you have any personal questions or just more focused questions for your business or interest in UX testing by people with disabilities, please reach out. We've got several contact us forms on our website, and we would love to have a conversation offline too.
Thank you so much for the wrap up, Gianna, and for picking up the bits I missed at the beginning. I appreciate that.
No,
Thank
I
you
think you
so
covered
much,
everything.
Bob, for
Thank
being
you.
here and sharing your personal experiences. I know I certainly appreciated it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yep, I really appreciate the invitation. Thank you guys for what you do.
yes.
All right.
Thank you guys. All right, we'll see everybody next Thursday. And thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.